So now we're going to actually get your first little piece of lecture content by talking about what is anatomy and physiology, and more importantly, why are we structuring our study of anatomy and physiology the way we are. And a lot of this hinges on the fact that the human body is hierarchical. That means there are layers within layers within layers, kind of like an onion. So we're going to look at that hierarchy first by looking at the two main ways in which we approach the study of the human body in this particular class. So the first thing we look at in anatomy and physiology is anatomy, which put simply is the study of structure. We're looking at how the body is put together. What is the relationship between the different parts of the body and how the body functions? So we're really interested in a structure-function relationship. And in anatomy, a lot of that is going to involve learning a lot of new names. It's almost like another language. In fact, it is another language. You're going to be learning a lot of Greek and a lot of Latin because we need to learn the names of the structures in order to be able to communicate effectively with one another to better explore and understand this relationship between structure and function. So that's the anatomy piece of it. The other half, of course, is physiology. And in physiology, we can talk about types of physiology. We can structure our discussion of physiology by organism. So there are people who are mammalian physiologists and people who are insect physiologists and people who are fungal physiologists. But of course, we're all talking about people. This is a human anatomy and physiology class. So we can talk about physiology at various organizational levels of the human body. So some people study the physiology of a particular tissue. Some people study the physiology of particular types of cells. Or people talk about and study physiology based on function. For example, respiratory physiology, which is the physiology of the respiratory system, or digestive physiology, which is multiple organs and multiple tissues. So anatomy is really going to concern itself with structure and how the structure of the body relates to how the body functions, and physiology is really more related to the function of particular tissues or organs. So whereas anatomy might be about the size and placement of a muscle and how that muscle does its job, physiology would be more about chemical changes taking place within the muscle that allow it to contract, or chemical changes that perhaps would impede its contraction. Okay? So now what we're going to do is I'm going to put you to work. So right now what I want you to do is pause the video and read through these things, and then renew the video, and I will go over them with you. So go ahead and pause the video now. Alright, so let's go over these now that you've had a chance to read them. So the first, Dr. Morgenstern studying the relationship between forearm length and pitching speed. So we're looking at the length of the forearm. That is a structural relationship with this function, or the ability to pitch a ball. So that's going to be anatomy, because it's looking purely at the structure and its relationship to the function. Now, development of a drug that alters the levels of glucose in the blood, something that's going to change blood sugar. That's going to be physiology. We're changing a function here. We're looking at something that's going to be happening chemically, and that generally is going to be more physiological in nature. Now this third one was a bit of a trick question. So smoking results in increased production of mucus in the membranes of the respiratory system. That's a little bit of both. So production of greater mucus is a physiological response to stress, but it's then going to change the anatomy of the respiratory system by making the mucosa effectively thicker. So that one's going to be a little bit of a both. So you can see why we tend to study both of these at the same time, especially at the introductory level. We're interested in the intimate relationship between both anatomy and physiology. Okay, so that's one way of talking about the hierarchy of the body, the way the body is put together, and then the way the pieces function. But as you can see, there's a little bleed through between those two things. So the next thing we're going to do in our examination of the hierarchy of the human body is look at the various levels of organization. Remember I said at the beginning that the human body is structured in multiple levels of organization, like an onion, right? Layer upon layer upon layer. So if we get down to the smallest layer that we're going to concern ourselves with in this class, that is the level of atoms and elements. So individual atoms, and believe me, these are very important to us in our study of anatomy and physiology. Single atomic species like the calcium ion or the sodium ion can have drastic effects on the physiology of the entire human body. Okay? Now, we can take atoms and put them together into molecules. So, for example, I think this is a molecule of caffeine. And then we can take those molecules and put them together into macromolecules. Macro just means large. So this is a ribbon structure of a protein, which is comprised of the molecules known as amino acids, which are comprised of atoms of carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen, and sometimes sulfur, and sometimes other stuff. Okay? So the study of the molecular and atomic nature of things is referred to as chemistry. And so we're going to begin our study of anatomy and physiology by studying a little bit of chemistry, because we have to understand just a little bit about atoms and molecules and macromolecules in order to understand the next level of organization. So macromolecules can then be further piled up into larger macromolecular complexes, like this ribosome we see here. And macromolecular complexes are often found with and associated with organelles, which are subcellular structures, which of course then are found inside of cells. So this study of cells and the organelles and macromolecular structures that make them up is the study of cellular biology. And we're going to have to study a little bit of cellular biology, because just like all of your cells are made of atoms and molecules, all of your body's tissues and organs are made of cells. So we really can't understand all of the various components of anatomy and physiology without first having some bit of understanding about the cell. Okay. Now once we know about cells, then we can put several different cells together and form a tissue. So tissues are made up of many different cells, and the study of tissues is referred to as histology. So after we've learned a little bit of chemistry, after we've learned a little bit of cellular biology, we'll study a little bit of histology, and that will then lead us to the study of whole organs, and then organs that all work together, which we refer to as organ systems, and this is the level of organization known as gross anatomy. And this is really what most people think of when they think of anatomy, is like learning the name of the ascending colon and the hepatic flexure and the duodenum and the things that you see in this picture of the digestive system on the right hand side of the screen. So then, once we get to the level of understanding whole organs, then we'll start looking at individual organ system and all the rest of Anatomy and Physiology 1 and all of Anatomy and Physiology 2. We'll be looking at particular organ systems, but as we do that, we have to understand that the organ systems are comprised of particular molecules that can oftentimes be found in that organ system and not in any other, that those organ systems are comprised of particular tissues arranged in a particular combination to make particular organs. So it all still boils down to, as we go through studying these different organ systems, we're still going to have to learn about and understand and appreciate every level of organization from there on out. Okay? So the human body is hierarchical. Let's see how much you remembered. So once again, I'm going to ask you to pause the video now, read read these things, and then after you've read through them, resume the video and I'll give you the answers. So go ahead and pause the video. All right, we're back. So blood is a tricky one. A lot of people think about blood and they say, well, it's a cell. But the thing is, blood is comprised of lots of different kinds of cells. You may have heard of red blood cells and white blood cells. There's also platelets. There's blood plasma. So blood is a tissue. It's in the histological level of organization, the tissue level. The brain, hopefully you realized, is an organ. It is comprised of many, many different tissues. Insulin is a molecule. It's a protein. So it's a macromolecule, so it would go in the molecular or macromolecular level of organization. The nose, the trachea or windpipe, and lungs, considered collectively, are an organ system. That's your three of the components of your respiratory system. And then finally, sodium is an atom. It is found in our bodies as an ion, as the sodium cation. And it's very, very, very important. We're going to revisit the important role of sodium many times, both throughout A&P 1 and into A&P 2. Okay, so why? Why do we care? What's the point of all of that about anatomy versus physiology, about the various levels of organization? Why do we care? What's the point of all that? Well, the point is stability. All of the various physiological processes taking place in our body require a stable internal environment. So what it all boils down to is that the job of these various organs and organ systems that we're going to be learning about function to keep the body's internal environment stable. See, here's the deal. It doesn't matter how hot it gets within reason, if it's 70 degrees outside or if it's 100 degrees outside. You're generally going to have an internal body temperature of about 37 degrees Celsius. It doesn't matter if you eat fruit or pie. There's going to be a particular range of blood chemistry. Your blood sugar is going to stay, as long as everything is healthy and working right, it's going to stay fairly stable. So your body will always work. All of these organs and organ systems and tissues are going to work to keep your internal environment stable. And this is a process we refer to as homeostasis. So even though the external environment may experience large fluctuations, so for example, temperature may change greatly, various homeostatic mechanisms within the body are going to ensure that your body only experiences small fluctuations in its internal environment. And those external fluctuations may be in temperature, they may be in nutrient availability, but your body is going to work to make sure that no matter what's happening outside, it's going to do its level best to make sure that any changes that occur inside happen within the normal safe range. That's homeostasis. Okay? So any variable your body could have, internal temperature, blood sugar, waste levels in your blood, the level of gases in your blood and in your tissues, all of these are going to be kept fairly stable. Okay, so here, check this out. Your tissues, like the muscles on our muscle man here, they need oxygen in order to function, but they create carbon dioxide as waste. So your muscles require oxygen, they create carbon dioxide. So in order to maintain the homeostasis of those gases, we have a respiratory system, a means by which we can get rid of excess carbon dioxide and bring on more oxygen. But wait, when you contract your muscles, muscles generate heat. So what are we going to do to keep the internal environment stable? Well, our skin is going to produce sweat. Sweat is going to allow us to cool off. But what if you're cold? Well, we just said muscles generate heat. So you'll shiver. The muscle contractions will generate heat and they will keep you warm. But we need fuel to create that heat and use the oxygen, right? Your muscles have to have energy. Where do they get that energy? They get it from the foods you eat. So all of these organs and all of these organ systems are going to be working together to keep each different homeostatic variable within its normal and appropriate range. So all of this is going to work together to ensure that we have a stable internal environment so that all of these other various systems can do their jobs. So none of the different organs and organ systems that we're going to learn about in A&P1 or A&P2 exist in isolation. They're all working with and for the rest of the components of the nervous system. I hope this has been edifying. I hope it's helped you out a little bit. If you have any questions, of course, you're always free to email me, or I'm very happy to take comments in class when next we see each other. Enjoy!